One of the most beautiful aspects of memoir is it lets us take this part of our life that we struggled so hard with, our biggest hurdles, our most difficult challenges, and use that tragedy to inspire others. Now, a lot of times when I hear from people, what they want to do is they want to help others by offering a sort of roadmap. They want to show other people who are going through what they've already survived how to kind of navigate the bumps in the road along the way. But of course, our opportunity with Memoir is much larger than that. We not only get to help people who are going through the same struggle that we went through, we also get to help everyone feel just a little bit of inspiration and drive to keep going when times get really tough. But when you sit down at the computer, this is so much easier said than done. So today I want to offer you 4 secrets to make sure that your memoir is as inspiring and motivating as I know you want it to be. Stay tuned. Now, y'all know I don't normally offer discounts, but right now we are celebrating the 1-year anniversary of this YouTube channel, plus our full-time hire of our newest master book coach, Emily Thrash. So right now, when you sign up for a one-on-one coaching package, you are going to get a 50% off coupon for one of our a la carte publishing services. You can either watch to the end of this video to learn more about this offer, or head over to pageandpodium.com/Emily. So very often when people come to me and they want me to help them get through their memoir, either coaching or ghostwriting, what they want to do is find a way to inspire other people through their story. And the reason that this is so challenging is that when we are so close to the story, when we're the one that lived it, it's really difficult to see kind of how the trajectory played out in our lives and how we can help other people see that in their own lives, since obviously your story has all kinds of things that are really specific to you that many readers aren't necessarily going to relate to or connect to or honestly even care about, right? So what I want to talk about today then are the things that unite all kinds of inspiring memoirs, and also, by the way, fiction and other types of books too, because these are the things that you can check your memoir for, that you can weave through your work to make sure that as you are writing that first draft and then as you are revising that manuscript, you can really be certain that you've kind of checked these boxes off. Now, these are things that I don't hear talked about very often, but I think as you hear them, they're going to make total perfect sense as just kind of the types of things that really uplift our spirit and make us feel like we can push forward even when things get really, really hard. So with that, I want to jump into my top 4 secrets for memoirs that inspire. And the first one, I think, is a little bit counterintuitive at first. Now, oftentimes people will think that they want to write a memoir for readers who match their exact struggle. So for instance, if you are going through a really difficult breakup or, divorce or separation, you want to target the readers that are also going through that in your life. Or that can be true of a medical diagnosis, that can be true of kind of a big move, a career shift. Oftentimes we're really thinking who is like us when we're thinking of who our reader will be, who we're going to help, who we're going to inspire. But this first tip, I want to actually challenge you to think a little bit differently about your struggle. Because the first secret of an inspiring memoir is not that you match your reader's struggle, but rather that you frame your struggle as universal. Now, let me talk a little bit about what this means, and I want to give you an example that I think is a surprising example. So if you have not picked up this new memoir in 2024 called Sociopath by Patrick Gagne, I want you to go pick it up. One of the things that I love about this book is that the author is actually a sociopath. She also has an advanced degree in psychology, so she is able to think about all of the challenges that she has gone through because she is a sociopath. Now, this was a big splash in the literary world, I think for pretty obvious reasons. It's not every day that we see someone that has this psychological issue that is so stigmatized in our culture come out as a protagonist, which is effectively what she is doing by writing her story. And the reason I want to use this as an example of universalizing your struggle or universalizing your trauma is that most of us are not sociopaths, right? So when she sat down to write this book and she wanted to make it inspiring and universal, that's a really big challenge, right? It's a really big challenge to say, here is my story. I am a person who has this diagnosis that is just hugely stigmatized, but I want you to relate to me. That's such a tall order, right? Well, one thing that I love that she does is that rather than focusing only on her specific disorder, which, by the way, as she's figuring out, sort of what's wrong with her, kind of why she feels different than other people, this isn't even really a diagnosable issue. In fact, she talks a lot about how it's not in the DSM, or the Diagnostical Statistical Manual for Psychology. But even though this is such a rare disorder, the way that she is able to talk about it is in terms of figuring out who you are, right? Discovering your identity. So we get to see Patrick go all the way from her childhood through this very successful career where she is navigating, yes, being a sociopath, but more importantly, she is navigating how she fits into the world. Now, I think this is such a clever and important device because it not only lets her reader relate to her, even though most of her readers are not sociopaths. What it allows her to do is inspire others through her quest for becoming, her quest for identity. Well, who among us can't relate to that, right? So I think this is useful because when we start thinking about, well, is our story only going to relate to other people who are going through that exact story, it starts to become very clear that that is really going to limit our reader base, right? There are not going to be as many people who are going to relate specifically to whatever you're going through as can relate to a trauma that is a larger, broader, more universal struggle. So what I want you to do as you're working on your memoir is think about, yes, your specific topic, the topic that you are writing about, the thing you went through. But I also want you to think about how can you expand that? How can you invite other people to relate to you, not necessarily through that specific struggle, but through some component of that struggle that you can identify as a universal human experience. What are the things that we all go through? What are the things that we all need and want? What are the things that all of us can relate to at some level to some degree? And when you write a truly inspiring memoir, you are not tapping into your specific case. You are tapping into a truth of the human spirit, a truth of our souls. So how can you be intentional about that? How can you weave through this universalization of your struggle? That's what people want to connect to. That's how they're going to feel that they also can do hard things, even if it's not the same hard thing that you did. Okay, so that's number one. I want you to think about how can you make your struggle or your trauma, how can you make it universal, even though we know it's not. So the second piece of an inspiring memoir is also related to your struggle. Really, that is such an important part when you're thinking about this uplifting, inspiring message. And that is, I want you to think about how can you weave that struggle all the way through to the end. Now, this is something that seems really natural and it seems like everyone would do this, but I see every single day, I see folks who are writing a story where they started in one point, they overcome the struggle, and then the struggle just kind of vanishes. Once they get, halfway through, 3/4 of the way through, and they're kind of in that story, they're kind of in their new life, they're in their new routine, they're kind of finding out who they are. This is the inspiring part, right? And the instinct, I think, very understandably, is to leave the struggle behind. So we'll drop off talking about whatever it was that we went through because now we're talking about having been through it. This is such a mistake, and here is why. When we think about what our struggle is and what our triumph is, those standing on their own may or may not be all that exciting, right? What is so engaging for your reader is to see the contrast between what you overcame and how you overcame it, right? The before and the after. And you know this because, oh my gosh, do we love a before and after. All my Instagram reels are just before and after of different people doing amazing things, comparing their old life to their new life. We want to see the contrast. So I want to give you again an example, and this is an example, a very, very well-known example. Tara Westover is Educated. Now, there are many things to love about this book. It won many awards. I'm sure you've probably read it, and if not, go pick it up. But one thing that Tara does is that as she is going through her story, she starts off, if you're kind of not familiar, she starts off being raised kind of out in the middle of nowhere in a little bit of a kind of culty-ish, very stringently Orthodox religious kind of area, and her dad has some mental health struggles. So her childhood is a really big part of the struggle that she is overcoming. Now, as she goes through, we see her do these incredible, amazing things. Like at one point, she is studying at Oxford. I mean, she is doing huge things that are very, very far psychologically, but also distance-wise, very far from where she came. So as she is trying to kind of work through what her triumph is, it would be very, very easy to just have her leave behind what she went through as a child, right? It's not her childhood anymore, whatever. Instead, what she does that I think works so well, and she does this, I think, really subtly, is that she weaves scenes throughout that allow us to recall what she went through so that we can see where she is now. So she does that in a couple of ways. One is that she, in that point in the story, in this kind of later point in the story where she's an adult, she does go back and kind of physically revisit her family and kind of see what's going on, right? So she is in contact and conversation with her family, which again, really lets us see kind of how far she's come, because the way that she reacts to them in the beginning of the book is really, really different than the way she relates at the end. So not only, is she coming back and she's kind of visiting, and that's showing, but the other thing that she does that I think is probably a little bit more workable for some of y'all is that she also is using flashbacks. She also is pulling back scenes from her childhood and moving them into that later part of the book so that, again, we can see the contrast. We can see where she came from, we can see where she is, and that really shows us, oh my gosh, she's come so far. And the reason that we need that is that a book is going to be gradual. It's going to be a gradual build, right? We should see you little by little, healing, growing, overcoming. Whenever change is gradual like that, it's really hard to see it. So what I want you to do is think about how can you, in that last, say, third quarter of your book, make extra sure that you are dropping in, ideally, both revisiting wherever you came from, whatever it can be the situation, it can be the place, revisiting what you went through, or everyone can do this, pulling scenes from earlier in, it could be your childhood or when you're going through the struggle. How can you pull scenes, ideally scenes that you haven't already talked about in your book, scenes that represent what you went through and put them into that later part as flashbacks? How can you use these scenes from when you were right in the heart of the struggle, when you didn't know what you're doing, you hadn't learned the lesson yet? How can you pull those to the end of the book so that we can really see how far you've come? We can see where you came from, where you're ending. How can you do that? How can you weave those scenes through so that we are consistently, as the reader, reminded of where you came from and how far you've gone? Okay, so you are going to universalize your trauma, and you are going to think about how you can really lean into that contrast between who you are, where you were, what you came from, and where you end up as your book comes to that inspiring climax. Okay, the third secret of inspiring memoirs is that the voice should feel familiar to the reader. Now, this makes sense, right? Because even though we are often inspired by, people that are, huge celebrities, whatever, think about the most inspiring stories you have heard. Almost never do they seem distant from us. Almost always, the most inspiring stories are stories that we see ourselves in. Now, we already talked about universalizing your struggle, and that's one important way to do this. But I want to talk also about voice. One thing that I do see often is that as newer or beginning authors are trying to kind of set out to write their book, they put a lot of pressure on themselves to be good writers. So to find whatever that sort of secret element is that makes the writing itself good. Here's what the actual secret to good writing is you don't even notice that it's writing. The best writing is when we are just reading along and it just feels like someone has just sat down with us over coffee and opened up their heart. That is casual, it is easy, it feels familiar to us, right? We can hear ourselves, we can hear our friends, we can hear our family in that voice in our head as we're reading off the page, right? It just feels like someone we know. And when a story feels like it comes from someone we know, isn't it so much easier for us to see ourselves doing those inspiring things? That's why voice is so important. And the good news is it means that you don't need to be looking at all of these literary geniuses or the canon or whatever that might be and trying to emulate, long, flowery sentence structures or, short sentence structure, whatever it is that you admire. All you need to do is write the way that you would express your story. Write the way that you talk, frankly. When you go back through and you edit, you may decide that you want to kind of tweak it, you want to add some extra symbolism, you want to kind of do more vivid scene painting, that kind of thing. We always do that with our books. That is an important thing to do for sure. But you can do that in the revision. And what is going to serve you really well is if you can sit down, relax at your computer, and really just let the words come out of you the way that they want to come out of you. There is nothing that is going to slow your writing down more than censoring how you want to speak, how you want to communicate, because you think you need to sound like someone else. Now, I want to give you an example that I think just really illustrates this so clearly, and it is from What My Bones Know by Stephanie Foo. Now, I've talked about this book before on this channel because it's one of my very, very favorite contemporary memoirs, but I think it's so great for voice because she is in radio. So she is somebody who is going to be able to think about what sounds right to our ears, right? What sounds kind of conversational, what sounds easy. And I will tell you, whether you read this book or you can listen to the author on audiobook, whichever way you do it, it just sounds like a casual chat. But now here's what I want to say. So while it sounds that way to me, I suspect it will sound that way to you. Usually I have a pretty clear kind of audience niche here. It might not sound that way to everybody, right? Different people speak and write in different ways. Different people have different types of communication preferences. But the reason I think that Stephanie Foo's book speaks to me so much is because she is an NPR radio person. She is somebody that works in this area that is where I do a lot of my listening. I get a lot of my news. I get a lot of my entertainment media is from this kind of this public radio, it's a little bit more of an educated voice. That sounds familiar to me because that's how I talk. That's how the people that I tend to spend my time with talk. It is familiar to me. And so I want to drive this home because what I don't want you to hear me say is go get Stephanie Foo's book and imitate her voice. Absolutely not. Instead, what I want you to do is think about what is authentic to you. Now, sometimes it's hard to do that when what you're thinking of is, what do I sound like? That's who knows what we sound like, right? We can't hear ourselves very well. What I want you to do instead is think about who do you interact with that feels very safe and real and grounded to you? And how do they talk? Do they put a bunch of flowery language? Do they use a lot of symbolism? Are they somebody that uses a lot of metaphor in how they talk? Are they somebody that is very blunt, very straightforward? They just tell it like it is? Are they somebody who has a lot of kind of jokes and wry humor? Are they somebody that is kind of always laughing, even if maybe sometimes the thing isn't that funny? What is that voice like that feels like home to you? Because that is the voice that your readers are going to connect to. It just is. There is no way for us to kind of dial into a reader that is so different from us that they don't sound the same. Instead, lean into who you are, because that's the way you're inspiring them, right? You're saying, I am like you are like me, here is what I did, and you can do it too. Amazing, right? This is how we get inspired by stories. Okay, so we are going to universalize our trauma. We are going to weave those early struggles through all the way to the end to give our reader a sense of the contrast between where we were and where we are. We're going to make sure that that voice is something that sounds really homey and familiar and real and genuine and authentic to our reader. And the fourth secret to memoir that inspires is I only want you to go to 95% triumph. Now, I kind of saved this one to the end because I think it's the least intuitive and it may be the one that you have objections to. But let me kind of go into an example here because I think you're going to get what I mean. And this is something that actually is going to make your writing process a lot easier too. When I say I want you to go to 95% triumph, what I mean is I want you to leave the end of your story open enough that we imagine that you are still being thoughtful, you are still being curious, and most importantly, you still see room for growth. So let me give you an example, and then I want to talk a little bit more about how you can do this in your book. So the example I want to use is Wendy Davis's memoir. This book is so powerful. If you haven't read it, go get it right now. It's called The Fight You Don't See. Now, Wendy Davis is a politician. She is somebody who ran for office and she did not win. At the end of her book, she is sort of reflecting on the fact that she went after this dream. She wanted to be a politician since she was a child. So she's reflecting on having gone after this dream and not hit it. And there were a lot of reasons for that. And, she really, by the time she wrote the memoir, she's really had made peace with a lot of the things. There are still some things that are pretty crappy in this book, but she really has kind of come to terms with a lot of what has happened. But as we round out to the end of this book, to the very last chapter, what we see is Wendy on a trail, kind of walking through the woods near her home and just really thinking about kind of what might be next for her. And the reason this is so inspiring is that every one of your readers has a different place they want to go, right? As universal as we can make the struggle, and I hope you will, we really cannot make the triumph universal because all of us have our own visions, right? If you say like, oh, I'm going to write about my struggle of, a really messy or difficult divorce or separation. Well, different people want different things after that, right? Some people want to kind of rediscover who they are, build a whole new life. Some people really want their routine back. Some people really are fighting because, they want like full custody of their kids. They really just want to kind of be back to where they were. Everybody's going to have a different vision of what it's going to look like at the end of that struggle. So I do see a lot of early memoirists making the mistake of trying to get to 100% triumph. They want to show that they have conquered the entire thing. There is nothing left to do. They've got it. And while I understand that seems like it would be more inspiring, in reality, when you leave just a crack of the door open, you are actually being much more effective at inviting your reader to see themselves in you. So how are we going to do this? Well, the good news is you probably actually are only at 95% triumph. In fact, I've worked with a lot of people that I'm not sure they even were up to 95%, right? So the thing that you've got to do is be open and vulnerable. There is such a temptation to pretend as though you are further than you are. To really say like, nope, you know what? I can actually put that final nail in the coffin of my struggle and it is over and I am never looking back. But is that true? Is it true that there is not a day that you are pulled back into that trauma, that there is not a moment that you kind of flash back and maybe have some kind of a fear response or a sadness response or grief? I think most of us that have been through something really hard and overcome it, of course we know that you probably were never going to be 100% healed, whatever that would even mean, right? We are always building and growing, and we are always a work in progress. So what you've got to do in your book is stop yourself short of asserting that you're done. You've got to stop yourself short of giving that book a hard ending. Now, we do still have to have a place that the book ends, right? But what I want to point out is that there is a difference between a happily ever after and a happily moving forward. And I want you to aim for the second one. I want you to think about how can you leave this window open for your reader to see their own choices reflected there. And the way that you're going to do that is by being vulnerable enough to admit to your reader that you have still got some work to do. Okay, so we are going to universalize our trauma. We are going to make sure that we pull that struggle through to the end so we get a really nice contrast with our inspiring ending. We are going to make sure that we are using a voice that is genuine and authentic to us, because it will be genuine and authentic to our readers then. And finally, we are going to only get to 95% triumph. Now, I promise you, if you pick up any memoir or really any fiction book or any movie that has inspired you, you will find that these are all true. These are universal things that are going to help a story be inspiring. So all you've got to do now is think about how can you map them onto your story. If you'd like help, stay tuned because we have a really great special running this month and I would love to work with you one-on-one or have you work with our amazing new coach, Emily Thrash. So reach out if we can help. And otherwise, I am so excited to be inspired by your memoir. I know you can wrap this up. I know you can make it amazing. Happy writing. I am so excited to be celebrating the 1-year anniversary of this channel, plus our newest hire, Master Book Coach, Emily Thrash. And that's why, as I said at the beginning of this video, we are offering 50% off one of our a la carte publishing services. Now, that can be a full book cover design, it can be an interior layout, it can be copy edit on your full manuscript, it can be a proofread. Any one of our a la carte services is on the table for this offer. All you need to do is sign up for our one-on-one coaching program, Editor in Your Pocket, by September 13th, 2024. Now, when you do that, you are going to get not only that 50% off, you are getting our amazing Editor in Your Pocket program. I am so proud of this program. With this program, you not only get that weekly 50-minute one-on-one time with your master book coach, you are also getting weekly developmental feedback on every single one of your chapters. So what does that mean? It means we will know exactly where you are. We will know where you need help and when you need that help. We can give you the confidence you need to keep going even when you're not sure if your manuscript is any good or not. And by the end of this program, most people have either a full set of feedback on their full first draft, or if you're efficient, you can even get a full set of feedback on your second draft. That is priceless. So all you need to do to get in on this offer is head over to pageandpodium.com/Emily. You'll learn more about our 50% off offer, and you can also click over to read more about the Editor in Your Pocket program.